Welcome to a special edition of the Under the Sisterhood podcast, Women Making History, during Women's History Month. We will celebrate 6 women and focus our conversations on each woman's life-changing contributions. This is a podcast to celebrate women and all that they do in our world. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. Today, we're celebrating Women Making History with the incredible Ndidi Nwuneli, a mother, daughter, sister, friend, women's advocate, and an expert on food ecosystems, entrepreneurship, social innovation, and philanthropy. Ndidi has over 25 years of international development experience and is the founder of LEAP, Africa, and African Food Changemakers. She is also the co-founder of Sahel Consulting, Agriculture and Nutrition Limited, and AACE Foods Processing and Distribution Limited. Ndidi serves on the boards of the Rockefeller Foundation, AGRA, Godrej Consumer Projects Limited in India, Stanbic, IBTC Group, the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum, and the Bridgespan Group. Ndidi holds an M.B.A. from the Harvard Business School and an undergraduate degree with honors from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. She was a senior fellow at the Mossavar-Rahmani Center for Business and Government at the Harvard Kennedy School, a visiting scholar at Max Bell School of Public Policy at McGill University, an Aspen Institute New Voices Fellow, and an Eisenhower Fellow. Ndidi is a TED speaker, was recognized as a Schwab Fellow and a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum, and has received numerous awards and recognitions, including a national honor by the Nigerian government and the Harvard Business School Distinguished Alumni Award. She is the author of Social Innovation in Africa, a practical guide for scaling impact, and Food Entrepreneurs in Africa, Scaling Resilient Agriculture Businesses, both published by Routledge and Walking for God in the Marketplace. Welcome and to Women Making History. Welcome, Ndidi.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for this great platform that you've created for women. I applaud your efforts, Elizabeth.
We have a special edition, a series of 6 women who were celebrating Women Making History. And based on your story, you've been making history since you were a very young woman. And so if it's okay, I would love to get started.
My pleasure. Really happy to engage.
I'm really curious because you came over at such a young age to the United States from Africa to attend school. Can you talk a little bit about your childhood and what that spark was to come here and begin your journey to all of this social impact that you're making?
So I was born and raised in Enugu, Nigeria, which is in the southeastern part of the country, to an academic family. Both of my parents were professors. They had been educated in the US. They actually went to Cornell University. And we had a garden in our backyard. And I had a very early interest in agriculture and in growing things and seeing, wonderful plants produce fruits and vegetables, not just for us as a family, but what we could share with the rest of the community. And agriculture was actually my favorite subject in high school. And so from an early age, I had this personal interest, but then my parents also taught us about service and about giving back through their own lives, their own sacrifices. They modeled the behavior, and all 5 of their children, were introduced to service from a very young age, and the values of integrity, excellence, education, and also service. So I feel very fortunate to have been raised in the country at the time. But it was also a very difficult time in Nigeria. It was the military era. We were actually being run by the military government, and there was tremendous suppression of media at the time, but also hardship for professors because they weren't paid for months on end, because universities are usually the bedrock of process, and young people very readily take to the streets to say this is not good for us. So there's a huge anti-authoritarian movement sparked from the universities. So there was a crackdown on the universities. And so my parents, who had ordinarily thought that we would go to university in their campus, decided that it was best for all of us to go to the US because we were dual citizens. As I mentioned, both professors, my mom is American, my father is Nigerian. So I came here at 16 to go to college, but really treasured my early childhood in a very sheltered and loving family.
So you came over to the U.S. I mean, this is amazing. So you came over to the U.S. You went to Philadelphia for college. What was that experience like, and how did you take your passion and bring it forward from a schooling perspective?
Yes, I was actually really fortunate to have gone to the best schools, both University of Pennsylvania and Harvard, and very fortunate to have excellent education. But one thing that struck me about being in the US was that I was confronted with this face of Africa. And the face of Africa that I met in the US was a hungry child. My friends would tell me, oh, my mom used to say, finish your dinner. There are starving children in Biafra or in Somalia or Sudan. And this picture followed me. I would put on the television and see infomercials. I say, support an orphan in Uganda for $10 a month. And I just thought this picture was very, very dangerous, because it was what my friend Chimamanda Adichie calls a single story. And the danger of a single story, that when you think that everybody from a continent is hungry, then you don't think they have agencies to solve their own problems. And I was confronted with this image that was in stark contrast to some of the images I had grown up with lush farmlands, lots of food available to share. And I didn't know this hungry child. I hadn't seen this hungry child on a daily basis in my own backyard, but this was the image that the US had of me. And so I quickly committed from an early age to say, I want to change the face of Africa. I think it's important that people know that there are hungry children everywhere, and there are hungry children in the United States, in Washington, D.C., in parts of New York City, and there are hungry children in Lagos, Nigeria, for sure. But it's not that identity is very dangerous. So I committed to saying, what can I do to not only change mindsets, but also to create businesses that would ensure that we change that narrative by empowering ourselves, creating wealth, actively telling different stories from the continent. And when I was at Penn, I became the president of the African Students Association. When I went to Harvard Business School, I started the Africa Business Conference, which is now the largest student-run conference out of Harvard Business School. And I was very involved in building bridges between the African continent, with 54 very diverse countries, and the United States, to ensure that we not only get to know each other better, but also break down stereotypes that are often very negative.
Congratulations on taking what you were feeling and turning it into something that's empowering that feeling. And I would like to ask you, Ndidi, so you're in school and hearing that, what was that feeling like? Here you are, 18, 19 years old, and you're dealing with that, not understanding the perceived face of Africa, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think it was very tough. But you see, and this is why your programming is very important under the sisterhood, because we have faced biases in so many ways. As women, as people of color, there's prejudice tied to people's preconceived notions and the narrative they hear. Right. And so my conviction and commitment is that if you educate people and expose them to alternative narratives, it broadens their horizons. And I think that's what you're doing so powerfully with your work. And so that's what I try to do, is to not only tell alternative stories, show up in my own capacity with excellence and integrity, but also open the door for others to show up and to connect in a way that makes us human. And I think we have a shared humanity. And unfortunately, years of distrust have been built because of ignorance. And so I think there's a powerful role that we play in changing those narratives. So yeah, I'm one of these people who, and there's a book we wrote about it called Rage for Change. I'm somebody who says, what makes you angry and what can you do about it? So you can deal with anger in many ways, but I believe in channeling your anger into positive change, in making sure that you're mad enough to make a difference based on what you see in the world that hurts you, what you see in the world that pricks you at your conscience, and that each of us is uniquely suited to address something that makes us sad or gives us joy or gives us energy. And in my case, it's been every business I've started, every initiative I've started is because I've been angry about something and I've decided to channel my anger into positive change.
So you go off, you go to Harvard Business School, the Kennedy School, you're doing all these incredible things. So did you stay any longer? Or did you go right back to Africa and put all of your incredible education to work?
Yeah, so basically in between Wharton undergrad and Harvard Business School, I worked for McKenzie and Company in the Chicago office. And had an amazing experience there, building my problem-solving skills and working with both local and international organizations and consumer goods in the nonprofit sector, in the public sector, trying to make change happen. And I think that was a great foundation because you learn analytical skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills, which you can leverage in many sectors. Now, McKinsey gave me an offer to come back, and when you get an offer, they actually pay for your business school. So I went to Harvard Business School, and then I came back to McKinsey for a short time this time around because I got a call from a successful Nigerian entrepreneur, and I was 25 at the time, and he had started a range of organizations and called me to say, would you come back and help with one of them? And the first one was called Fate. The fourth offer he gave me was for Fate Foundation. It was a new nonprofit startup that would work with young people to help them become entrepreneurs so they could create jobs for themselves and others. And so I went back at 25 to serve as the pioneer executive director of the Fate Foundation. And the Fate Foundation continues to thrive today. It's reached thousands of young people, helped them start successful businesses, and it's helped many established entrepreneurs also scale their businesses. And I'm really proud of my role as pioneer executive director, but also what the founder, Faladiola, and the team of dedicated board members and staff have been able to achieve. And then from Fate, I then started Leap Africa, which LEAP stands for Leadership, Effectiveness, Accountability, and Professionalism. And it works with young people to help them become leaders of today and tomorrow by teaching them key values and helping them become social entrepreneurs and leaders in the public and private sector. And I served as the executive director, the founder, and served on the board for 20 years and stepped off the board last year. And LEAP now works in 8 African countries, and I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish with LEAP.
It sounds like you were born with tenacity, this drive to really make a difference in the world. So, talk a little bit about LEAP and then what you're doing now as you've moved on from there.
Yeah, so when I started LEAP, we basically envisaged an organization that would not only teach young people to be dynamic, creative, innovative leaders that would solve problems in their society, but also that they would build companies and organizations that would outlive them. So we thought a lot about governance and succession. And when we started, we used to work with individual youth who were up and coming leaders and individual entrepreneurs. Over time, we realized that we had to scale by teaching teachers to deliver a curriculum in public schools. Because if you want to reach thousands of people, change mindsets, then you have to go from hundreds to thousands and then hopefully millions. And the conviction with LEAP was that in many of our contexts, we're often told as young people we're leaders of tomorrow. And I rejected that notion. I think young people are leaders of today and tomorrow. When you're young, you have energy, you're willing to take risks, you're more creative, right? And some of the greatest revolutionaries in the world, if we study history, did it when they were young because they were fearless. They didn't see boundaries. And so that's what LEAP has tried to do, is galvanize young people. And the great thing is by teaching teachers to deliver the curriculum, you're then able to have this individual who's a change agent nurture generations of students who believe this. And how we measure the impact at LEAP is not just in terms of who has been trained over a one-year program, but the change projects they've started in their communities, because then they exercise their leadership muscle. They test their ability to challenge the status quo. They start innovative projects to solve problems in their community, and they channel their range into positive change. And so I'm really proud of the team at LEAP, and we have a very dynamic board that continues to sustain the vision, even though as a founder, I've stepped off the board and I'm not involved in day-to-day management. So that's the LEAP story. We also start a Social Innovators program and an award ceremony. Every year we select between 30 and 40 social innovators from across West Africa who we give prizes. And then we also provide training to enable them to scale their work. And LEAP has been fortunate to get supported by some of the leading funders across the world, both US funders like the Ford Foundation and MacArthur, but even received funding from McKinsey Scott most recently. So I'm really proud of this institution that is synonymous with excellence and integrity. But beyond LEAP, in 2008, 2009, 2007, 2008, there was actually the first food crisis in my adult life. And as I mentioned, while I was very passionate about youth development, agriculture was one of my favorite subjects. And I realized back then that this was now an opportunity to take on another major problem and something that made me angry, which is that even though Africa is naturally endowed for agricultural excellence, we still have such high rates of post-harvest losses, low yields, poor distribution of food, lots of issues around a broken ecosystem, and climate change, which is also making the situation worse. So I decided to partner with my husband, and we started a food company called AACE Foods, which sources from farmers and processes for the local market. We started a consulting firm called Sahel Consulting Agriculture and Nutrition. Then he spun off to start a private equity fund called Sahel Capital. And then I started African Food Changemakers. So 4 organizations in the agriculture and nutrition landscape, transforming the sector.
With all of the people that, or the social innovators, the change agents that you were talking about, was the focus on agriculture, or was it across many different sectors and verticals?
Yeah, so for LEAP, the focus was not just on agriculture. It was on everything from health to education to whatever makes you angry and what can you do about it. So it was really broad-based. But of course, there were some entrepreneurs in the food ecosystem. But I ended up narrowing it down significantly when I went during the food crisis in 2007, 2008, but without touching LEAP's work, and then started a whole new range of expressions.
So talk a little bit. I'm really curious to hear more specifically about sort of the conversation around food poverty and your ideas around that as it relates to everything you've been talking about for years, but now what you're building as your 4 organizations to support it.
The conviction, I mentioned the face of Africa being a hungry child, and my commitment to changing that by first through faith, helping create businesses, through LEAP, ensuring that those businesses are socially minded, they're ethical, creative, and driven, and then also inspiring the next generation of private, public, and nonprofit leaders. That was LEAP. And then over the last 15 years, I focused quite exclusively on food and agriculture, because Africa is naturally endowed for that, but also because we need to collectively ensure that we feed our continent, but also feed the world. And so through these 4 ventures that were born out of our time living in Senegal during the food crisis, it became very clear to me that we could address some of the bottlenecks in the food ecosystem. So each of the companies has a different focus. AACE Foods, as I mentioned, is an agro-processing company. So we produce spices and seasonings and snacks sourced locally. They're nutritious and they're for the local market and exports. And we started that, ran it for a few years, and then put in place a management team that's really dynamic young Africans who run this organization. And I'm really proud of what they've done. And you can find our products in all the major supermarkets and open air markets in Nigeria, but also B2B. And we're gradually entering other markets, including the US. So that's AACE Foods. Sahel Consulting is a more traditional consulting firm. Remember my McKinsey background, so I could write business plans, strategic plans, market entry studies, and we partner with a lot of international development organizations, including the Gates Foundation, to lead ecosystem changes in seed systems, in dairy, in policy, etc. And we have about 60 young consultants who are so passionate about this and who work on the board.
Can you talk a little bit about the sustainability and sort of your thinking about your approach to that?
Yeah, so sustainability has a few lenses, right? So sustainability means, number one, that you actually have a strong governance structure within your own organizations. For every entity I've started, the first thing after I write my concept notes is I put together the board, because I believe that these organizations have to outlive me. I have clear missions, visions, and values articulated, which the organization has to imbibe. And then sustainability also means systems and structures throughout the entire organization, a service culture, but also sustainability around climate, because climate really affects the food and agricultural landscape. So it's from everything from how we use water to how we manage soil to how we manage waste and plastics. And so that has to be woven into the culture of the organization. Beyond the organizations themselves, it's also how you ensure that sustainability is infused into the ecosystem that you shape. So those are all pieces of a puzzle that make sure that not only is your organization a catalyst for sustainability, but that your organization outlives you, which also makes it sustainable.
Actually, you said a little earlier in Ndidi, you said it's not about future leaders, it's about future young leaders. So talk about sort of your approach to that, not just today's young leaders, but how you see today and the near future, like what you're imagining.
Yeah, the amazing thing is when you imagine the future for most of our countries, it's going to be young people. Africa currently has 70% of its population less than 35. They are the engine for growth, for innovation, for creativity. And we see this manifested not just in the food ecosystem, but also we see it manifested in the creative industry, our music, our fashion, tech. And so it's really an exciting time to be galvanizing young Africans to take the future of the continent into their own hands. Through African Food Changemakers, which is my latest startup, we envisaged a DevEx, LinkedIn, and Facebook for ag and food entrepreneurs. And our vision is 1 million young entrepreneurs that are not only scaling their businesses across the continent, but also changing global narratives. And we've started helping them scale, become more climate resilient, trade with each other through our different programs. But more importantly, we're telling their stories, because it's not just about Ndidi, it's about hundreds of thousands of amazing young people who the world should know about and who are leading important efforts to change narratives. We've also started telling stories about our food, because the rest of the world doesn't know that they interact with Africa every day by the food that they eat. And I'll give you a few examples. Coca-Cola was made with cola nuts from West Africa. That's why it's called Coca-Cola. And this is history. It's not even made up by me. Okra is an Igbo word that was adopted and first found in the annals of Virginia in the 1600s. Okra is Igbo, and my language is Igbo. So every time someone says okra anywhere in the world, they're speaking my language, right? Coffee was born in Ethiopia, and 18 countries in Africa produce some of the world's best coffee. And I could go on with chocolate. So if you've had a hot chocolate today, a cup of coffee or Coca-Cola, you have Africa to thank for it. And people recognizing that they connect with us through food, I think an amazing way to build bridges.
I mean, I'm just imagining you coming to the United States at 18 years old with this passion, this anger, the rage that you turned into positive change, creating life-changing solutions, changing not just the narrative. I love the fact that you're changing the story in the face of but you are changing the face of Africa. So what I would like to ask you about this history that you've been making and sort of the creativity and the fire, where did you get the time with all of your work?
Yeah, so I have written 3 books directly, but through my work at Leap, actually edited or wrote up to 11 books, but I published them under Leap. So, but I write I write a lot. And the reason I write, Elizabeth, is because when you look at the global literature, so few African voices show up as experts in many ecosystems. And I really feel that, that's a lost opportunity. Historically, our culture was more of an oral culture, oral tradition, where stories were passed down from generation to generation. And we have to write, right? We have to capture our voices, and our voices have to be amplified. So I've been really fortunate to benefit from many, many initiatives around amplifying African voices. And I do that now through my work. It's amplify other voices, to write opinion pieces, to get facts out there, to shape narratives about our current realities and our future. And where does the fire come from? I'll say the fire comes from my faith. I'm a strong Christian. I became one at a very young age. And I'm someone who believes that every human being is called for a purpose. We have a limited time on this earth, and we have to figure out our purpose and commit to making a difference in the lives of others. And because I've been blessed with a lot of positive role models and real angels who have supported me, both in my career and my personal journey, and a very supportive family, I think that has made a difference.
As I hear this conversation, I'm left and struck with Ndidi is, telling the narratives, amplifying stories and other stories and the voice. But, there's a saying, which is, actions speak louder than words. Like the way I see it, based on this conversation, is you have just an amazing amalgamation of both the story, the word, and the ability to build out companies that really affect change. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
You're too kind. Thank you for all your kind and lovely words. But I mean, change is never easy. Being innovative and being a founder is really tough. It's a lonely journey. It takes a lot of humility and courage. And I can't say that it's been easy, but if we have a community of support and have strong values and know who has sent us, then we can keep striving.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And it is a lonely journey. We're coming to an end. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that. And I have one question before I ask.
I agree with you, and I applaud you, because I think, we've been talking about Africa more broadly and my journey, but I think being a Black woman, and when you layer on gender onto race, you see that the complexities are even more pronounced, because even with everything that I've done, I still walk into rooms and I have to prove myself. I have to prove that I wasn't here by quota. I have to prove that I worked and deserved it, and I have to prove that I'd earned a seat at the table. And so I think we still have so much work to do in creating a level playing field and supporting others who are coming behind us. And I commit every single day to opening the door for other women and making it easier for women who have come after me. And I am standing on the shoulders of giants. I've been fortunate to have amazing mentors from Harvard Business School, Deborah Spar and Linda Hill, both amazing professors, to at McKinsey, and all through my life. And I've committed to doing the same thing. I don't get a board till the board commits that they'll replace me with another woman, and if possible, another African woman. And so that's my conviction and what I've tried to do with my life.
Having to continuously prove yourself is really exhausting. That going to Wharton, going to Harvard Business School, doing a fellowship at the Kennedy School, doing everything you've done would be proof enough. And just to have this conversation, I'm getting angry. I'm getting angry. Rage for change here. It makes me really angry, and I know because I haven't experienced the same way. I've only experienced it from a patriarchal system, white woman way, and so getting to the comment of the seat at the table, we need a seat at the table for all women, and really importantly for women of color. And so the stronger we stand together in that and create those spaces and open those doors for other women, the more unified and the greater change we will see in the world. And I'm not just talking about the work you're doing, I'm talking like unilaterally. The more women at the table, we will affect greater change, and we'll have the ability to really actually probably have a happier world, if you will. And so this is your opportunity to leave a message for women around the world of all cultures, of all ages, and all backgrounds. What do you want to say to them?
So I'd like to say, number one, that this is a unique time in history. That women are showing up in amazing numbers, not only in universities where we're hitting about 50-50 when it comes to enrollment, but in entry-level positions. But yet we're seeing women fall out of the workplace as they move up higher into roles. We're still seeing blocks when it comes to boards and board equity. We're seeing blocks when it comes to rising in political power and positions of authority at the highest levels. And so I think this is a time for us to galvanize ourselves, to invest in ourselves, to raise our voices, to write more so that opinions are heard, to speak out, to mentor other women, and to unite. I'm excited to see what the next generation can do, because unlike some of us who have been conditioned, our children, our daughters in particular, are not going to take the back seat. They are eager to come up front and be seen and heard. And as older women, we must support them. We must give them the wings to fly, and we must position our shoulders for them to fly. The second point is a quote that Madeleine Albright had that I love, which says, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women." It's one of my favorite quotes, because I think, as we've talked about, women have so many multiple burdens that they carry, multiple responsibilities in the home front, in society, as daughters, as wives, as mothers. And we need to support each other, because we know that the road has not been easy. So where you do have an opportunity, open a door for another woman. Create a board seat for another woman. Make sure you leave a woman as your successor when you've been given that opportunity. And finally, my final message is, find time to show you self-love to yourself, because we're often the most critical of ourselves. Appreciate and pat yourself on the back and say, "I'm doing well, I'm making progress," and surround yourself with helpers. It doesn't take anything away from you to be vulnerable and say, "I need help." Ask for help when you need it. Invest in self-care, because we need you around as long as possible to lead the change. We need you to be healthy, to be happy, and to be strong, and to come up and show up as a full person who can give your best every single day. So give yourself the nurturing, the care, and the support you need to excel. I'm rooting for you. I'm looking forward to celebrating you, and looking forward to seeing change happen because of the work we did collaboratively to create a better world for future women. Well done. Congratulations, and all my love. God bless.
Thank you. What a message. And I am just, wow. I'm in awe, back to the word awe. But, I have to say, women making history. And Ndidi Nwuneli has been making history since before she was 18, when she was farming, when she was creating her little gardens. And I actually think that that's a beautiful ending to this conversation, is to imagine this young girl who becomes this incredibly powerful woman planting her garden. And that would be Ndidi Nwuneli, who has built this incredible multiple companies and is doing so much good. Congratulations, and thank you for being such a change maker and a woman making history.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for being a woman making history too.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.